Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages. Welcome back to another exciting edition of the F4L Headquarters podcast with yours truly, the F4L Icon. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Well, today, everyone, is Motivational Monday. And one thing that I like to do more than anything is let people know that anybody can achieve any goal that they have. Anyone is capable of achieving whatever they dream of as long as they're willing to put the work into getting it done. But they also know what happens after they do. For example, let's say your goal is to become the best combat specialist. Let's say your goal in say MMA is to be the champion. Well, that's great. You're the champion. However, that is not the end of your goal, and that is not how that works. You see, after you become the champion in combat sports, much like anything else, you must then be the one who everyone's going to be the measuring stick. You become the measuring stick. That everyone wants to try you. Everyone wants to be the champion, so they're going to come looking for you. And how many people are ready for that? Are you ready for that? But in all honesty, for myself growing up, I always enjoyed being on top and being the person that everyone wanted to try. It's a sense of pride. It's a sense of being able to read my opponents, but also the respect that goes along with it. People knew who I was and knew what they were in store for, except for the fact, once they stood across from me, they knew what they were going to get into, and they knew what they were about to encounter because they may have seen it before, or maybe they had prepared. Well, what I come to find out is not a lot of people had the same training as I did. And not everyone took it as serious as I did. You see, sometimes I guess it comes to do this. When it comes to your goals and dreams, people have different ambitions for different reasons. People want those goals for different reasons. Let's take combat sports, for example. With me, for a young age, I started competing in tournaments when I was 5 years old. I started training when I was 4. So ultimately, a year after I started training, I was entering what we called then freestyle tournaments. Freestyle tournaments were basically tournaments done in martial arts where you would face other schools in your region, up and down the East Coast, where the students were cross-trained, as we called it. That was someone who was trained in more than one style. For example, for myself, I am trained in Kenpo Karate, Judo, Muay Thai, and then I got into Chun Kudo, which is Chuck Norris style karate, as well as Greco-Roman wrestling as well as boxing standard. So I am quite the handful because one of the things I like to incorporate is a lot of the Judo, and I think a lot of people maybe not understand what exactly Chun Kudo is. Chun Kudo actually has a lot of various elements, borrowing from several different things, such as Judo, Taekwondo, as well as various other things, Tun Su, which is another one, or also various different grappling things, such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Because that's it's kind of a hodgepodge of various different things is Chun Kudo. I started taking that when the dojo I trained at offered it ultimately, and I enjoyed it. I did enjoy a lot of it, and it was very much a show of discipline and heart and grit and determination to be able to step in there and go onto a mat. And then at 5 years old, they said we're going to start doing tournaments. So I'm like, okay, cool. I said before how I didn't necessarily have the support system at home, so to speak, but I used that as fuel on the mat, which was either a pro or a con for some. If things were bad at home, then I excelled even better on the mat because, truth be told, whenever I'm really upset, really angry, I get really, really focused. So I would become really focused on my projective, which was to win any of the tournaments that came up. Now, a lot of these up-and-coming stars today, a lot of these, young athletes are competing in martial arts today. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, various other types of striking type things, Muay Thai, or what they call Muay Thai. And I'm glad that my friend Marcus said something. One of the up-and-coming stars over across the pond there, he studies traditional Muay Thai. I was trained in also traditional Muay Thai, but I was trained here in the States. He is trained not only in his home, in the native home of Muay Thai, which is Thailand, but also where he is across the pond over in England. And he's a tremendous young athlete and whatnot. I haven't really talked a lot about him on the show because he's got a little different goals and stuff like that. I know people see things like that and they kind of get a little worried about, how training goes. But I got to point out something that he has pointed out that, he's trained in traditional Muay Thai, and I was trained in also traditional Muay Thai, which is, by the way, Thai kickboxing, for those people who don't know. And basically, there are no rules, really. There's no helmets, there's no pads, there's no shin guards in these sports. It's just striking. Elbows are legal, knees are legal. There's really no rules, ultimately, in theory. But, I had often, seen people who are supposedly doing Muay Thai recently who are wearing helmets and pads and everything else. And I wonder, isn't that kind of distracting from the objective? Isn't it kind of prolonging what you're supposed to be doing? I don't know, that's just my thought, maybe. When I was training, there were no pads involved in any of those things. And in the tournaments that I did, there were no pads or guards of any kind either. And we also didn't have rings like they do now. We had mats that we competed in. And there was not a mat that I didn't have the respect of the person across the mat from me. Now, I got to tell you guys this. I've given this tip before, and I'm going to give it again, because some people have maybe misunderstood it, and maybe some people need to hear it again. But listen, when it comes to training, here's the difference between what I did years ago and what people are doing now. Let me tell you a little bit about what my strategy always was. And I want to point out that when I competed, I was probably one of the top people in the Northeast because I have one draw on my record, and I have many, many matches or tournaments under my belt that I have won in my division. And when it comes to submissions, it's one of my favorites. I do have some knockouts as well. I have one draw on my record, and I started training when I was 4, and I started competing when I was 5. My last tournament that I entered was when I was 18 years old, and I gave that up so I could pursue pro wrestling. Now, take that into account, and I had a tournament of some kind almost every single weekend from 5 until high school. And then high school was tricky because I would have both sports meets from high school as well as martial art tournaments as well. It's a good thing that I never dull easily. And one of the things that I still have to this day is the drive. And I think that's an important thing to have. And I think a lot of people who are in the sport, you have to understand that even if your objective is to become the champion, if you think that's the end goal, well, that's great that you're the champion, but now that you're the champion, you should be also expecting people to come want to challenge you. And if you are not someone who is challenging and actively looking to challenge your champion, or not someone who's willingly looking for the best fighter that you can fight, then what are we doing here? If you're facing the same people over and over again, if you're, fighting people you know you can beat just because you want to have clout, that's defeating the purpose of whatever your objective is. And if you are a champion, but you're only facing people you know you can beat because you've beaten them before, then that's not really the champion's way. The champion should be, whoever challenges the champion should be one of the toughest people in their division. It should be one of the toughest competitors, and they should earn that right by showing such. But if a champion, it's kind of like, are we familiar with Rocky Balboa, the movie Rocky? See, there was a part in Rocky, I think 3, where Rocky was taking little time fights. He was basically taking on anybody who was not to the caliber of Apollo Creed, or Apollo Crews rather, or all these other people that he was facing. Creed, I was right the first time, Apollo Creed. And the Ivan Dragos of the world. So he was facing all these people he knew he could beat as the champion. And Mickey, who was his trainer, was booking them in that such. Which is why Clubber Lang, who was played by Mr. T, called him a paper champion. Because Mr. T came from the streets like Rocky Balboa did, except Mr. T was hungry for the title. And I want to point out that the results of Rocky 3 were that because Clubber Lang was so hungry for that title, and that the champion got so complacent with all of these supposed challengers that he's faced prior, basically fighting people he knew, Mickey and his team knew he could defeat, he could not excel at the level of Clubber Lang, who was just taking one person after another. I know I'm comparing a Rocky scenario to martial arts or in general, but this is kind of the way the championship works, people. Excuse me, I take a sip of my Beetlejuice coffee that finally came in. By the way, I'm very happy that my Beetlejuice coffee came in from our friends at Dead Sled. Excuse me. And now that's not because of the coffee, folks. I went down the wrong pipe. I'm sorry. Now, back to this. So, when you guys think of what a champion is, today, I've seen many people fight, and many people who have challenged others. And I've seen people who, want to pretend like they are legitimate athletes and tough guys and whatever else. But here's a couple things you need to know about how I trained years ago, and one of the mistakes that I think that everyone is making, and which is an advantage if you do the opposite. And I'm talking about social media. Because here's the thing. A lot of people have asked me, hey, where's all your fighting videos and all of this, that, and the other thing? Well, when I competed in martial arts, when I competed in tournaments, that was before social media existed. There was no, Instagram. There was no YouTube to post my fights on. And the way I got my respect from everyone, the way I earned my victories, the way that you got your clout was by word of mouth and by showing up. And that was up and down the East Coast. So that's kind of how it was prior to the social media era. Now what happens is everyone posts everything to social media. You post your workouts, you post your fights, you post your walkouts. You know what? That's awesome. You should post your walkouts. And I think it's important to show that you're, going to be out there or whatever else. But here's the problem. There are people, I guarantee you, there are going to be people like me who, let me tell you what I did when I was competing, which is what gave me the advantage over everyone else. A lot of people, when they competed in tournaments, they would go back to the locker room and wait for the next challenger, or they'd go and wherever else they would go and get a break. They would get some water. They would go to the bathroom. They would do all these things in between their next matches, right? I didn't do that. I stayed on the mat and I watched everything. I watched every competitor that was competing. Now, at these tournaments, much like they are now, there's several mats and there's several matches going on at each of those mats in different divisions and everything else. Now, I'm watching every single match while I'm in between my win. The reason I do that is because it's only a matter of time till I have to face someone who's on this mat. Even if it's not in this on that specific day, eventually down the road, because we all know, if you've been in the circuit, if you've been in the realm of competing in these things, you'll see the same people over and over again. It's usually as we call it, the usual suspects, and that's a sign of respect when it's the usual suspects. But here's the thing about that: back in the day, when I could tell when someone was going to. How a fight was going to be by how the person presented themselves, how they came to the ring, how they made eye contact, how they entered the ring. It wasn't a ring. It was, like I said, it was either a mat or whatever else. But how they chose to get into that area would tell me a lot. I'm going to give you some examples, right? And these are things that you probably wouldn't even think about. When I was on the mat, the only thing that mattered was me winning for my school, for my dojo. Doing everything I could so my dojo won. That was the only thing that was important to me. And I used all of my skills to do that. And I watched every single match, like I said. Now, taking that into account, let me tell you what a lot of people do when they go into these events. And let me tell you how I can spot weakness. If your head isn't in the game to absolutely do whatever you can to defeat me, if your head is elsewhere, if your goal is to put on a show for someone who's watching you, to make someone in the audience proud of you, to get clout with the girls or your parents or whatever, you've already lost. Because even though, yes, my objective is to win for my dojo, but I have tunnel vision when it comes to a mat. The minute I know I'm facing you on a mat, and let me tell you, at a tournament, because I watch everything, I know who I have to face, and I'll know when I have to face them. So when that time comes, I step up to the plate, and it was ready to go. And then that's right. It's go time. That bell rings. There's no more objectives. There's no more second guesses. There's no more, what do I do now? Am I ready for this? No, I already know what this match is going to be, how long it's going to be, and what this person I'm going to face across from me is going to bring. And half the time, at that age, a lot of kids are doing it either to make them, to make themselves look good, to make their parents proud. Here's the thing, which is both a disadvantage and something I wish I kind of had. And also, I didn't have a parent going with me at all these events. It was just my dojo, it was my sensei and my other classmates who was going to these events. Because as I mentioned before, it wasn't something that was embraced by my family. They thought it was kind of, sissy-ish that I would go and learn how to do karate and martial arts in general. They didn't see it as being something viable that I could do anything with, and whatnot. So they didn't see the, what was actually was. And then I had other people who flat out thought it was for, violent purposes or disruptive purposes, which is also not the case. So, in general, what would happen is that I would go to these mats, and like I said, the minute you step to that mat, I already knew everything I needed to. How you walked to the ring, how you came to that circle, how you got to the mat. Is your head down? If your head's down and you're afraid to make eye contact, you're intimidated. If you're coming to the ring or coming to the mat and your eyes are on the crowd, is mom and dad watching? Is scouts there? Are there scouts here who are going to scout me for whatever? Listen, if that's your mindset, then you've already lost. Because your mind shouldn't be on the scout in the crowd or your parents in the crowd, because you're on the mat with me, not your parents. And I know that might sound crass, and I know that might sound like something that is kind of mean, but it's a reality. The reality of it is, one of the things I've seen happen the most in these things that actually led to most of my victories is, while I'm competing with someone who is, there with their whoever, their family or their coaches or whatever, and their senseis or whoever else, the parents are screaming and yelling all kinds of instructions, telling the kids what to do. Then the senseis are telling them other things to do. My sensei sat silent because he knew I had it all in the bag. 1 second, folks, as I take a sip of this. My sensei, who was very wise in general, he was cross-trained himself, learned multiple arts from various different things, and he really emulated the inner peace and the inner sanctuary of the mat. And he also taught us that, you're going to get a scar on your eye, you may have some blood coming from your nose. Listen, the pain is temporary. Scars are just tattoos with better stories. If this is something that might sound tough and it might sound barbaric, it might sound mean, it's not. It's realistically what the sport is. It's combat sports. It's not ballet. Ballet is its own element, and ballet, I have a lot of respect for them too, by the way, because that's just as physical and just as demanding and has just as many injuries in it. This goes back to something I said a long time about respecting each other's differences and respecting everyone's elements. But here's the thing. I want to finish up this little objective on sports and combat in general. If you're a champion, you need to be ready to defend your title at all times, and you want to defend your title against the very best, not some mediocre person or someone you've faced 900 times already. That doesn't make you a better fighter. If you fight the same person 6 times in a row and you beat that person 6 times in a row, 5 different ways, you're still not progressing. You're still not getting challenged, and you're not getting better as a fighter. I'm sorry to tell you that. The only way you're going to get better is by fighting someone who's going to take you to your limit. And yes, I have been taken to my limit. The one draw I have on my record was because I got taken to my limit, but I did not lose. On the same sense, I've been taken to the limit by other people, but I still won with great pride. It's always about knowing your opponent, what they're going to do, what their mindset, what's their objective, what does everything tell me about everything going on. Did they carpool? Did they get there on their own? Did their parents drive them? What are their parents driving? Now you might be saying, well, what does that have to do with anything, what their parents are driving? Well, based upon what I grew up with, and what background someone has. Why do people go into combat sports? Sometimes it's to deal with bullies, and sometimes it's about self-discipline. Sometimes it's about, finding self-worth. Sometimes it's about finding confidence. Yes, you find all of those things in martial arts. Sometimes it's about finding balance. Doing something that's going to make you spiritually, physically, mentally strong. A lot of people don't understand that goes along with martial arts, is that all of the spiritual stuff, all of the mind stuff, all of the philosophy, all of the psychological parts of what martial arts are. And today, it's all about how many kicks you can do, how many, knockouts, submissions, blah, blah, blah. But how many people are willing to put the work in to getting that done, to taking that step, to becoming someone who everyone wants to hunt? Because that's ultimately what you want as a champion. There's an old wrestling saying by the great Ric Flair. I know he's a professional wrestler, not a Greco-Roman wrestler like a lot of people are. I've done both, folks. But here's the saying that he said that actually speaks across the board. His very well-known saying is, to be the man, you must beat the man. In other words, if you want to be the champion and you want to be someone who someone should pay attention to, if you want to be the top of the crop, you must beat the best that you can beat. Not the mediocre people, not the people low beneath you. That's not going to make you a better fighter. That's combat sports, folks. But let's say your goal is to be an actor or a musician, or to be famous, an actor, musician, model, whatever. I want you guys to understand something. It's great if that is a goal that you want, but it's also important to know what goes into doing that and how much goes into doing that when you become into that realm. You see, folks, I've in my younger days, I've done some stage work in plays and musicals when I was a teenager and a young kid, and I enjoyed that as an actor and so forth. In film school, I also took some acting roles here and there, and I've done some extra work. But my strength is behind the camera and being able to see talent from a mile away. That is a secret gift that I have been blessed with. And let me tell you, I have seen some amazing people. I still see amazing talent that no one has even tapped into yet. And they're people who are supposedly being managed and whatnot. But here's the thing. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because I can relate to people who want to be an actor or be someone who's well known. But I want you to know what happens when you're successful. Because I think it's important to understand what the consequence of achieving your goal is. That's kind of what this kind of message is. And it's not to scare you or to deter you from getting your goal, but you really should know what goes into what happens on the other side of achieving. It's one thing to want the goal, but when you achieve the goal, it's about what happens after that. That's kind of what the premise of this is tonight. And I already gave you some examples of combat sports. But